whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E haere ake nei. The Prime Minister says it's not the Aotearoa way to leave anyone behind, so why are so few Māori vaccinated? And will that stop Auckland moving down a level? Māori Development Minister Willie joins us. New modelling shows just how many people need to be double jabbed to get anywhere near situation normal. Professor Shaun Hendy is live. Has the cruise ship industry sprung a terminal leak in these COVID times? And fries and a side serve of abuse food retailers copper from impatient and badly behaved customers. And forget relationship cold feet, we've got a love story for you. Two penguins in it for the long haul, Buster and 99.
Ahi Māori e, RNZ News at 5, ko Sarah Thompson tōko ingoa. The Prime Minister says more than 90% of the population will need to be vaccinated to avoid future lockdowns. New modelling released this afternoon suggests lockdowns may still be needed even if the country achieves an 80% vaccination rate. Jacinda Ardern says the more New Zealanders get vaccinated, the more freedoms the country gains.
What we can see is that essentially at very high levels of vaccine we can take level 4 out of the toolbox and instead set it aside while vaccines continue to be as effective against variants as they have been to date. And I know people will see that as very good news.
The National Party's COVID-19 response spokesperson says the new modelling highlights how critical it is that everyone eligible gets vaccinated. Chris Bishop believes the government should be organising a school-based vaccination drive, but it has no plans to do so this year. Roughly 73% of the country's eligible population, that's those aged 12 and over, have currently received at least one dose of the Pfizer vaccine. The police say a young Auckland woman whose body was found in bush last night was the victim of foul play. Lena Zhang, also known as Lena Harrop, was last seen about 6 o'clock Wednesday morning in Mount Albert when she left home to go for a walk. A body was found off a walkway between Grand Avenue and Summit Drive, or Wairaka Domain. Detective Inspector Aaron Pascoe says the family of the 27-year-old is distraught.
And we believe she walked from Jersey Ave along Richardson Road and then up Grand Ave. Lena is 130 centimetres tall. She is not tall at all. She has Down syndrome and she walked at a slow pace. She was wearing a long sleeve purple top and dark pants.
Detective Inspector Aaron Pascoe says Lena Zhang often went for walks in the area. An Auckland bus driver has been assaulted for the second time in a month in what the police say was a violent and unprovoked attack. The driver was dragged from his seat and beaten and is in a serious but stable condition in hospital. A 27-year-old man has been charged with wounding with intent and possessing a knife in public. In the last 6 weeks, there have been 35 reports of abuse or aggression towards Auckland's bus drivers, despite lower passenger numbers during lockdown. The Union for Hospitality Workers has contacted police as some fast food staff in Auckland are being abused by customers. The super city moved to alert level 3 at midnight on Tuesday, allowing restaurants to open for contactless takeaways. Unite Union's National Secretary John Crocker says some customers are frustrated by the inevitable delays and are taking it out on staff.
It's about customers losing it. They're impatient. They're acting like they're almost addicted to some of these products. And when you have someone who's been waiting a long time and they have some bizarre need for this product, they're acting quite inappropriately and irrationally, and it's getting dangerous in some places.
John Crocker says several incidents have been referred to the police. The Union for Nurses says Hawke's Bay Hospital is failing in its duty of care. It says staff are unable to respond to people needing emergency care in time and patients are being housed in dangerous parts of the hospital. The nurses are worried this could result in avoidable patient death. The nurses themselves are described as overworked, anxious about their standard of care and sometimes do not have time to take breaks. Moving now into sports news, the All Blacks coach Ian Foster says there's no hiding from the fact that Saturday night's 100th test against the Springboks will be a massive occasion. Foster has named his strongest side possible to play South Africa in their Rugby Championship match in Townsville, with Beauden Barrett at first 5.
This has got a sort of a bit of a legacy moment about it, hasn't it? 100 tests in 100 years, and that certainly made it a bit special. And also the fact that we haven't played South Africa for a couple of years, and we've got a bunch of players that are really keen to measure themselves.
The All Blacks top the Rugby Championship standings, and South Africa must win this weekend to keep their slim title chances alive. Meanwhile, elite players could be restricted to just 15 minutes of full contact training a week as World Rugby explores ways to employ player welfare and reduce concussions. The body issued the guidance today after consultation with nearly 600 players from around the world. The Wellington Phoenix men's and women's football teams will play all of their games in New South Wales until at least January. The Phoenix women will make their debut in the W League on December 3rd against Western Sydney's Wanderers, and the men will kick off their campaign against Macarthur FC on November 21st. Both teams will leave for Australia at the end of October. And finally, the New Zealand Breakers have added French shooting guard Hugo Besson as a second import to their roster for the Australian National Basketball League. And that's the news.
We have earthquakes.
There was quite significant damage done to that building when it hit. All the bricks from the wall actually came down and scattered and spewed all over the road.
Volcanoes.
It's like a disaster movie in slow motion.
And protests.
Let them shoot us on hollow ground.
We have it all. Morning Report, weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
Te reo irirangi o Aotearoa, funded through New Zealand On Air. Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Rāmere Friday. Northland to Taranaki, also Coromandel, Bay of Plenty and Taupo. Showers, some heavy and possibly thundery about Coromandel and Bay of Plenty tonight. Clearing tomorrow and fine spells increasing. Gisborne to Wairarapa, also Whanganui and Taihape to Wellington. Cloudy with periods of rain, clearing this evening and mainly fine tomorrow. Marlborough and Nelson, scattered showers, some may be heavy, clearing tonight and fine tomorrow. Bulla and Westland, showers in Bulla, mainly fine in Westland tonight with a few spots of rain in the north, but cloudy periods and showers tomorrow. Canterbury will be fine, apart from patchy rain in the north tonight, and Otago and Southland will be fine tonight with scattered showers tomorrow. Fiordland will see some showers turning to rain tomorrow evening, some heavy and some possibly thundery falls. And for the Chatham Islands, cloudy with rain developing tonight, then clearing tomorrow afternoon and becoming fine. That concludes the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Rāmere Friday. It's 6 minutes past 5.
Nā mihi Sarah, tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint I tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. New modelling has painted a bleak picture for New Zealand if it fails to vaccinate more than 85% of the population, either continuing lockdowns or the deaths of thousands of people every year. The calculations were done by Te Pūnaha Matatini at the University of Auckland and released by the government today, along with a plea. Please get vaccinated. Anei te kaere poata, a Craig McCulloch, Deputy Political Editor.
Auckland's Delta outbreak has spurred New Zealand's lethargic vaccination campaign, with rates accelerating in recent weeks. But still, just 62% of the total population has so far had a jab, and just 34% are fully protected. At those levels, New Zealand remains vulnerable, and here's just how vulnerable. New modelling shows that even if the country can lift that to about 75%, without lockdowns, Delta would wreak havoc.
We could still experience 60,000 hospitalisations from COVID-19 in a one-year period and 7,000 fatalities. Our healthcare system couldn't cope with this level of illness. We would need to continue to use lockdowns.
The figures were calculated by Professor Shaun Hendy and his fellow modellers at Te Pūnaha Matatini. They're fresh off the press provided to the government yesterday and not yet peer-reviewed. But they paint a worrying picture.
That's pretty frightening.
It sucks.
That's not how the Prime Minister sees it. She says she did not find the projections scary. On the contrary.
I see cause for hope. I got modelling much, much worse than this, much, much more dire than this at the beginning of COVID-19. And we then, as a result of that, designed a plan that meant none of that came to fruition. And we have the ability to do that again.
And for Jacinda Ardern, that primarily means one thing.
It all comes down to vaccination.
Just another 10% vaccinated makes all the difference. If the country reaches about 85% of the total population, the calculation changes. With some moderate health measures like masks and rapid testing, the number of deaths could drop as low as 50 a year. much lower than for influenza.
What we can see is that essentially at very high levels of vaccine, we can take level 4 out of the toolbox and instead set it aside while vaccines continue to be as effective against variants as they have been today.
So if we can get up into that 90% range, we can say goodbye to lockdowns.
That rate, though, is no small order. Many countries around the world have stalled at lower levels. It'll also require the vaccination of those as young as 5, so far not approved in New Zealand or anywhere in the world. MedSafe is soon to consider evidence from Pfizer for doing so from recent studies. The challenge for Kiwis then is a mighty one.
If we can just get certain people to have their injections, yes, that would be absolutely fantastic.
If 90% is what has been forecasted in order for us to get out of that, then I would definitely support that.
Hopefully, I guess we can get to 90% before we start opening up.
There remains one simple message: get vaccinated. It's the reason we should all feel hopeful.
A challenge and a plea, a carrot and a stick. Get vaccinated or get used to lockdowns.
It's not the Aotearoa way to leave anyone behind, and it just doesn't feel right. That was Te Piremia Jacinda Ardern commenting on Auckland's COVID vaccination rates today. Yet the number of Māori jabbed in parts of the super city are less than half that of non-Māori. She's challenged the region to reach 90% single-dosed by the time Cabinet reviews alert levels on October the 4th, hinting it could make a difference. But she says all ethnicities, including Māori, must hit the target too. But according to this week's figures, Māori aren't even close. 51% nationwide had received their first jab compared to 78% of non-Māori. Across Auckland, Counties Manukau is the worst. 50% of Māori have had their first dose versus 84% of non-Māori. And only 25% of Māori in that catchment are fully jabbed. It's 51% for non-Māori. And if you look at the numbers for rangatahi Māori, it is way worse. Māori Development Minister Willie concedes the numbers are disappointing. That's not just disappointing, is it, Minister? That's dismal, isn't it?
Well, you can describe it any way you like. We know.
How would you describe it?
Disappointing, but getting better by the day. And I'm encouraged by what we're getting back from our Māori providers. We've given a lot of support for them. We're working with them at the coalface. I just got off a phone call with our providers here in Auckland, and this is a tough area. This is, I think, Lisa, we're not comparing apples with apples here. We've got people say, oh, it's just terrible, and it's been disappointing. But as I said, it's getting better by the day. But we're talking about some of our people who hate the government, they hate the system, young ones, a number of them are disengaged. So we're working through all that. Don't get me wrong, this is a responsibility of the government, but we also are talking with our people about stepping up too.
OK, so how much responsibility does the government take for the very poor showing in Māori vaccination rates?
Well, the government takes the major responsibility in terms of the turnout, the poor turnout. But the reality is, from the start, we embarked. At the start, we
have you failed, Māori Minister, in the vaccination rollout? At
the start, we prioritised vulnerable New Zealanders, and Māori were part of those vulnerable New Zealanders. So we prioritised Māori who were on the front line and who are over 65, and we were working with. Very closely with Maori Health providers. So no, we haven't failed. In fact, we could have done better, and I know that. But we certainly said that Māori had to be a priority for us. But you learn as you go along, and also, as I said, you're not comparing apples with apples here, Lisa. You've got a real resistance, sadly, amongst some of the young ones, but I accept that the government has to take the major responsibility without doubt. We've got the resources, we've got the funding, but I'm challenging our people also to step up. We need whānau to step up. We can't do this on our own. We can't go into the houses. So, I'm challenging parents to step up, grandfathers to step up, and I think we can do it in tandem with our people.
So if you think the government takes the lion's share of responsibility for the poor showing, you as a member of that government, what are you going to do to make it better?
Well, my job is to get more funding, resourcing and support to our people, and that's what we've done. We just rolled out $38 million to Maori health providers. That was announced on the last day by myself and Penny Henare. We put $23 million into the pockets of our whānau order providers to get out to whānau. Earlier this year, we rolled out $16 million from Te Puni Kōkiri. So our job, my job, is to get funding, resourcing and support to whānau. And that's what I'm doing, and also working at the coalface with families. I worked at the coalface before I went to Parliament. I'm working at the coalface now, working with Minister Henare, both of us, who we're trying to work with young people. We've got meetings all the time. How do we influence? How do we get our young people enthused and get them out of hating the system?
Okay,
and
Minister,
let's get them rolling up. You know.
I'm sorry to interrupt. But that sounds good. Yeah, that sounds good in principle, right? But let's hone in on Auckland and take a look at the statistics there, because the Prime Minister has set the goal of getting 90% plus vaccinated in Auckland, and she's hinted that this could help us move down a level, right? So let's look at it. Waitemata, 58% of Māori, 1 vaccination only, 27%, 2 vaccinations. Non-Māori, 81% in that district have been vaccinated, 39%. Lagging way behind. And do you think that those low Māori vaccination rates in Auckland are going to stop the super city moving down a level?
No, I don't. I think that we've got and Māori have a concern for everyone, but the reality is we're in a campaign here to try and get our people vaccinated. Now, is that going to stop the level from going from 3 to 2? No, I don't think so at all. But we won't hold back in terms of striving to get our people up towards the 90%. I got asked this the other day. You know, what's a suitable percentage for Māori? My response is exactly the same as our fellow countrymen. We can't pull away from that, and I don't think we're going to be a burden on fellow New Zealanders. I'm sensing a lot of support out there for the struggle that we have. But, you know, this is a government that's put some resourcing, funding and time behind this. And, yes, we may have struggled a bit at the start, but I think we're on target now. You know,
Aren't you still struggling a bit? Aren't you still struggling a bit, Minister, when it comes to the Māori vaccination rate? So I put this to you. Can the Māori vaccination rate achieve 90% in the next 2 weeks?
Well, I think, you know, we've got to get realistic here, but we will strive to get it as high as we can. We're working on the ground with our providers, Turiki Healthcare, Waipareta Trust, you know, so I can't guarantee that. I can only guarantee a huge effort that is being rolled out, and I'm really encouraged with the support we're getting from Māori. So, you know, I don't accept your view that there's been some big failure from government. I think government we've made a good solid attempt. We've missed the mark in some areas. We've fixed it up. We're going to throw everything at this over the next few weeks and next few months. And I'm also saying that our people have to step up and support us. So we need whānau to challenge their young ones to get out there and vaccinate. This can't just be the government driving this across the line. The government provides resources, but our people have to step up too.
And that was Māori Development Minister Willie Jackson. It is 17 minutes past 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Kia ora rawatu mo te whakarongo mai. Haere aki nei, coming up, has COVID sunk the cruise ship industry? Police have launched a homicide investigation following the death of a woman near a walkway in the Auckland suburb of Mount Albert. Lena Zhang was reported missing after going for a walk yesterday morning. Her body was found in an area of bush off a walkway yesterday afternoon. Police have just held a media briefing and Detective Inspector Aaron Pascoe says it's believed Lena, who has Down syndrome, walked from Jersey Avenue along Richardson Road and then up Grand Avenue towards the Mount Albert domain.
We want to hear from anybody who saw her walking this route between 6:30 and 7:30 a.m. yesterday. We've made a number of inquiries and we've identified a person of interest from CCTV images who was walking up Grand Ave towards the walkway to Summit Drive at about 7:30 a.m. It's important that we identify and locate this male as we believe he can assist our investigation. We also want to hear from any local residents who live along the streets we've mentioned. That's Jersey Ave, Richardson Road, Grand Ave and Summit Drive. We're particularly interested in anybody who may have CCTV cameras that cover either the roadway or the footpaths.
Our reporter Chen Liu was at the press conference and is at the Mount Albert domain where Lena's body was found. Liu, what's happening there this afternoon?
So there are still a few police cars and officers here, and part of the bush area on Summit Drive is cordoned off, and there are still people around walking. I presume investigation is still ongoing.
And so what more do we know about this person of interest?
So this man was captured on CCTV. He's described as wearing a blue jumper and with dark skin and balding hair and a distinctive mark on his forehead, and was wearing a mask.
And can you tell us anything more about Lena?
So she's really a small person, and she's around 130 centimetres tall and has Down syndrome. And the police say she would have been walking at a very slow pace. And she's a regular walker in this area, so the police say the neighbours probably will recognise her. And police say she was brought up in a very loving family, to the point that she was able to allow to go for a walk on her own, and the family is devastated by her death.
Thank you, Liu. That is Chen Liu joining us live there from the Mount Albert domain. It is 5:20. Kia amo tonu mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. New Zealand needs to find better ways to deal with the effects of COVID or risks being left behind by the rest of the world, according to a tech boss. Businesses are calling on the government to drastically revamp managed isolation to stop them being kneecapped on the international stage because they can't travel. Ian McRae is Orion Health CEO and he joins me now. Kia ora, Ian. How hard is it to do business at the moment if you want to do dealings offshore?
Well, you can't travel. So, New Zealand's essentially a hermit nation, and we're trying to trade overseas. It's very difficult. I mean, we are looking to, we need 20 people up in the Middle East and another 15 up in Canada this side of Christmas. And as it stands, there is no way for us to get those people into those countries. And so, we're faced with a stark reality that some of those jobs we have to move to the regions. And even then, we'll probably miss out on some work. And for other companies, the situation is, well, far, far worse.
So this is because of MIQ, the inability to get them back home?
Yeah. MIQ is a huge bottleneck. So, if I try to get into the queue, and I can't, but if I tried to, I'd probably be number 30,000 or something utterly ridiculous. And if I travelled overseas, I'd be back sometime next year, I would have thought.
So everyone knows what some of the issues are, and it's easy to point them out. So what's your solution? What's your idea?
So we need a second path through MIQ, because the current one is clearly doesn't have the capacity. And we need a path for businesses, sports teams, others, where there is an easier way for them to come into the country. And, the sort of things, and this is the stuff that Ian Taylor has been talking about, and his articles are well worth a read. We're talking about a COVID passport showing double vaccination, daily saliva tests for employees and others. So the cost of that's getting down to $20 per test. Strict protocols, guidelines, isolation, and when we arrive back in the non-COVID hotels or maybe even at home, independent accreditation. This is something that probably NZTE or some organisation like that, because the ministry seems to have their hands full, and fines for any clown who goes and buys KFC when they shouldn't.
So you are saying that either they would isolate at home or at a hotel that doesn't need all that infrastructure that the government says is difficult to replicate, the military and the health workers and all the rest of it. So if companies are going to get that privilege, what responsibility would they take for returnees, and what penalties would you be prepared to wear if they don't do what they're supposed to?
No, there needs to be penalties. There needs to be strict protocols. They need to be reviewed and accredited. And, companies take this stuff pretty seriously, because if they don't, then they can't travel and they can't do business. And the beautiful thing here is it's not going to cost the country, the government. It'll cost them very little because the cost would be picked up by companies that need to do business.
Ian, isn't that in essence what the government is proposing with its pilot for home isolation for businesses if they want to put their hands up?
I haven't seen those details. So if we need to move faster. We can't sort of have this drift until next year. I presume the government is working on this, and it needs to happen far quicker than it is.
So would you like to see something actually operating before Christmas?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, we have, a significant numbers of people we need to send overseas. The idea of doing a quick business trip to go to an event, a conference, or visit a customer is today impossible. Actually, by the way, I quite like being stuck in New Zealand. Actually, I'm finding it quite nice. Actually, I have lots of hobbies now. So, but nevertheless, to do business, as a company, as a nation, internationally, you just got to travel, and so.
What are overseas people, your customers, the people you do business with, what are they saying about New Zealand's mentality at the moment?
For us, we are affected less than some other businesses because we already have offices in several countries. But it's going to become increasingly more difficult when these countries are opened up. Those countries, people are travelling, okay? And we say, we're from New Zealand, we can't travel. Okay, so it's going to become an increasingly more difficult thing to explain.
So do people think we're backward that you're talking to, or do they think we're utopia?
I think last year we had a good plan. I don't know, what did Mike Tyson say? Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. Well, but last year our plan worked. This year we need a different plan. Okay, and I'm sure the Prime Minister and others are working on this, but we need it sooner rather than later, and we have to change the way we're doing this managed isolation, and we need a plan to transition from complete isolation as a country to being completely opened up, probably sometime next year, and we need some clear guidance or some clear. We need to be able to plan as to how we're going to run our business.
People are risk averse after something like COVID, and outbreaks of past have taught us that people can't be trusted. They do dumb things. So why would New Zealanders place what is essentially their lives in the hands of private business and trusting that employees will do what they're supposed to if they're isolating at home?
Well, I think we're chasing as a country this elimination strategy, and it's really a pipe dream. We're the last country to do it, so it's almost inevitable we're going to get. If it's not the Delta variant, it's the next one after that. It's going to come to the country and spread, and we won't be able to control it. And so that we have to accept. But for businesses that take this pretty seriously because, their success depends on it. Our current MIQ processes and systems have been far from perfect. And so no, I think that businesses would do a good job in this area.
Good to talk to you, Ian. That's Ian McRae from Orion Health. Ho mai o whakaro, we would love your feedback. Nō reira ānei na kaupapa mō te hōtaka nei. What do you make of that idea? MIQ for businesses, and businesses would pay penalties if staff broke the rules, shorter periods of isolation, self-testing, and in lower level kinds of hotels, Ian was suggesting there. What do you make of that? Are we becoming a hermit nation if we do not do this? Also interested in your thoughts on Māori vaccination rates and how do we get them any higher? Pātui mai, text me 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or you can email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. The cruise ship industry says it needs some certainty around the border to save the industry and help towns who rely on their visitors. Princess Cruises has announced it's extending its pause of trips to Australia and Aotearoa into early next year, with some cancelled through to March. And while cruising is back on for travellers in parts of Europe and Asia, the local industry says that Ship and Hope has nearly sailed for their upcoming season. Tourism reporter Tess Brunton has more.
Before COVID, the upcoming cruise season was expected to bring in upwards of $650 million to the economy. Instead, the cancellations are piling up, with Princess Cruises the latest to push back their start date. Cruise Association Chief Executive Kevin O'Sullivan isn't surprised by the news, but says it's a bitter pill to swallow.
We've lost so far over 60% of the bookings for the season, for the 21-22 season. In other words, up to April. So at the moment, there's sort of less than 40% left of bookings. I expect there'll probably be more cancellations as we go on.
He says part of the issue is that there isn't a time frame for when cruise ships can come back, and discussions with the government have stalled.
Once we get up to the 90% of vaccination and the borders begin to soften, then that's getting a long way down the track towards working on what needs to happen in New Zealand.
New Zealand cruise company Heritage Expeditions got an exemption to bring a passenger vessel into our waters and run trips in the Southern Ocean. Its commercial director and expedition leader, Aaron Russ, says adapting is key after losing 85 to 90% of their usual guests when the border closed.
It's survive or die in the current climate for us, and so we've had to adapt and adjust, but it's exceptionally challenging. There's a huge amount of uncertainty in everything we do.
His company has run a successful season in Russia.
So we required that guests coming aboard, as well as all of our staff and crew, were all vaccinated or had negative PCR tests. We've seen as vaccination has kind of rolled out internationally that the vast majority of people coming aboard in terms of guests have been vaccinated.
He's not surprised international operators are cancelling.
A lot of Northern Hemisphere partners that we work with are discounting New Zealand as a destination for years ahead because their marketing cycles. We are very much at risk of being left behind.
Pennant Cruises Asia Pacific boss Serena Bratton hopes they won't need to cancel their December trips out of Dunedin, but she says the closed border is making them reconsider future trips.
In our industry, we have to plan at least 2 years in advance. And that's where I was saying that we're doing the 2024 planning now. Hopefully we'll be able to get some better certainty from the government before we sign off on that to enable us to include New Zealand, because it would be such a great shame to not be operating there.
She says some high-end touring companies are no longer planning to charter vessels to come to New Zealand. Panamu Tourism Group owner Paul Jackson says thousands of cruise ship passengers would usually travel on the Marlborough Flyer steam train each season. This year, he's preparing for a domestic-only season.
We've erred on the side of caution, and we've just really focused on the domestic market. We haven't budgeted on cruise ships returning till the end of next year.
The Ministry of Health says there are currently no plans to change border settings for cruise ships due to the associated high risk.
Tourism reporter Tess Brunton there. E te iwi e haere nei e a checkpoint. The leadership of the new health agency tasked with addressing inequities for Māori is revealed. New modelling lays out just how many people need to get vaccinated in New Zealand to return to situation almost normal. And a little love story, Buster and 99 together for almost 2.5 decades. Homai o whakaro, we would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program tonight. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or you can email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Anei, Sarah, mina pita pita kōrero.
Kia ora, Lisa. RNZ News headlines, ko Sarah Thompson tōko ingoa. New modelling suggests lockdowns may still be needed even if the country achieves an 80% vaccination rate. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says the more people who get vaccinated, the more freedoms the country gains. She says more than 90% of the population will need to be vaccinated to avoid future lockdowns. Meanwhile, the Māori Development Minister, Willie Jackson, says the low COVID-19 vaccination rate among Māori is disappointing but is improving. He says the government has some responsibility, but he is calling on community to step up. And Mount Wellington in Auckland is a new suburb of interest in the Delta outbreak. The Director General of Health, Ashley Bloomfield, is urging residents to get tested whether or not they have symptoms. There are pop-up testing centres at the Ferguson Drive Netball Centre and at Mount Smart Stadium. It is believed an Auckland woman whose body was found in bush last night was the victim of foul play. Lena Zhang, also known as Lena Harrop, was last seen about 6 o'clock Wednesday morning in Mount Albert when she left home to go for a walk. A body was found off a walkway between Grand Avenue and Summit Drive or Wairaka Domain. Hawke's Bay Hospital is being accused of failing in its duty of care. Sue Wallen from the Nurses Organisation claims concerns about dangerous working conditions have been ignored or downplayed. She says nurses are worried the conditions could result in avoidable deaths. Fonterra says the final milk price of $7.54 per kilogram of milk solids will provide an $11.6 billion boost to the economy. The payout is 35 cents more than last season. And finally, Auckland Council believes it is unlikely there will be any further water restrictions this summer after recent rain. An overnight deluge lifted the city's dams to 82% of capacity. Those are your headlines. Our next news and sport update is at 6.
Nā mihi, Sarah. No mai hoki mai. This is Checkpoint. Ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Ko taku hoa e nai ko Nona Peltier, who is here, as always, to talk business. Nona, the Reserve Bank has imposed tighter bank lending restrictions in an effort to cool the housing market. Now, what changes it made?
Well, people may remember that new home loans, so these are basically for buyers with a deposit of 20% or less, could have got a mortgage. The previous limit was that banks could lend up to 20% of new mortgages in that category. Now the bank is saying, the Reserve Bank is saying the new limit is 10%, and that is going to restrict the amount of money available for mortgages for new homes. And that's going to be difficult for a lot of people, especially new home first-time buyers who were very interested in those types of properties because of the lower deposit and so forth. But basically, the Deputy Governor, Jeff Baskin, says that current house prices are unsustainable at these levels and they threaten the country's economic stability. He said that it is high-risk lending and something needed to be done. So they had signaled that previously that they were going to come into effect October 1st, but that's now been delayed till the beginning of November due to the lockdowns. So, yeah, it's going to be difficult for some people to get into that property market for sure.
And let's talk about Amazon Web Services, right? They're planning to spend $7.5 billion to build data centres in Auckland. What are the details?
Yeah, so these are places where the idea is that if you have these data centres, and they're not the only company that's looking to do that. We've also heard from Microsoft, last year, they said they would build at least one. And Infratil has an Australian business called CDC. They're planning to build, I think, 2 also in Auckland. So it's not only Amazon that's keen on this type of business, and it's a growing part of the New Zealand economy because of the digital services that it offers. So it's basically cloud-based storage and access. This is going to be in New Zealand, so it will be faster and easier for New Zealand companies to access software and to make decisions and to develop. So presumably it will increase our productivity. One of the other things it will do is because there'll be a number of them, it will increase price competition, which is great news for business. So there you go.
And Nona, what numbers have you got from the markets today?
Look, interesting markets today because the U.S. Federal Reserve has finally played its card. It's likely to reduce its monthly bond purchases as soon as in November, and it's signaling that interest rates are likely to rise. Now, that wasn't a particular surprise, but what was the market reaction. It was fairly muted. And so, like the rest of the market, we rose nearly 0.2%. That was a 90-point gain to 13,306. And that's also been supported by some positive news about that struggling developer, China Evergrande Group. It looks like they will be able to make some of their payments, and so we'll watch to see what happens with that. And so the dollar is steady against the US at 70.1 US cents, 96.7 Australian, and 51.3 pence.
Thanks, Nona. Nona Peltier with Business. The government is standing by its COVID response for Māori, despite large disparities in both the number of cases and the vaccine rollout. It's been criticised for acting too late and for exposing inequality with the rollout. Accusations ministers deny. Jamie Tahana reports.
The data keeps getting clearer. In the last week, most of the country's new COVID-19 cases are Māori. The only death from this Delta outbreak has been a kuia, and only about 1 in 4 Māori are fully vaccinated, well behind every other group. COVID-19 Response Minister Chris Hipkins insists the government hasn't failed Māori.
No, I don't accept that, but what I do accept is that we do have an ongoing challenge to make sure that Māori are taking up the opportunity to be vaccinated. Māori have equal access to vaccines, same as everybody else, but clearly we've got work to do to make sure that they are comfortable taking that up and that they're coming forward to be vaccinated.
He says closing the gap is an absolute priority. An extra $38 million was announced yesterday for Maori health providers, the latest in a series of top-ups. But while welcome, several Maori health experts see this as more of a catch-up. Awerangi Tamahiri is a leader at Te Whānau o Waipareira Trust in West Auckland. They run social services, vaccine centres and a testing site. She says the current stats could have been avoided.
The whole way in which you engage with our people was done wrong from the start. The other thing is the way the solutions are being put in place now. Yes, we have got multiple solutions on the ground that we're doing, but if we were enabled far earlier to set up our own mobile responses, we would probably have had a very different uptake of vaccination.
The government has argued high levels of vaccine hesitancy is behind the lag, and work is underway with Maori health providers to get whānau along. Ms Tamahiri says providers knew this already, which is why they raised it last year, well ahead of the rollout and the Delta outbreak.
It often takes a crisis, like a pandemic, right, to actually be highly visible. So if we didn't have level 4 now, that cry that we've heard from our Māori leaders up and down the country earlier this year, that we must get to our people in case wasn't heard. Now that cry is being heard because we're in the middle of a crisis and they can see there is not a ready response in place that should have been done earlier on.
The Health Minister, Andrew Little, says this kind of foresight is what the new Maori Health Authority, whose board was announced this morning, will provide. On that board is Awerangi Tamahiri and other vocal critics of the response, like Dr Sue Kringle of Te Rōpū Whakakaupapa Uruta.
The Māori Health Authority would have been a strong Māori voice right at the outset of all the planning and decisions being made, not only how to respond to COVID-19, but actually how running the vaccination campaign. And they would have drawn on their networks, their strengths, their kaupapa Māori health services to say, right, this is the way we can deliver vaccination.
But that's a hypothetical. In the meantime, there's a rollout to catch up on and an outbreak to bring under control. In Panmure today, Ngāti Whātua held its latest drive-in vaccination site with the bus Shot Doi.
Me and Dot are waving signs, encouraging people to come on down. So we're the hype girls, getting people excited about getting vaccinated and coming to our pop-up centre.
Across the country, they're utilising whānau links, free hāngi, mobile vaccine centres, and this weekend, a fresh rangatahi campaign targeting under 35s, the group with the lowest vaccine uptake. Slowly but surely, they say they're getting there.
It's easy. In and out, yeah, it's pretty easy.
We just saw that it was here and it was a great opportunity to come in.
It was fine.
I've definitely come through, it's so easy, everyone is very welcoming and very supportive.
Just don't be scared, don't believe everything you see on, social media about the vaccine, and it's for our safety and for our whānau.
Get your vax. Yeah, protect the whānau and the kids.
Many more need to follow to help lift the number of Māori protected against COVID-19.
And a number of you getting in touch about our earlier interview with Maori Development Minister Willie Jackson on vaccination rates for Māori. This listener says, I support Willie, let's get this done. Someone else says, how much of our money do we need to spend before we can see a result from Willie? James says, high checkpoint, go Willie Jackson, enough reasons and excuses from Māori, just get vaccinated. And this one says, Jacinda Ardern not taking any responsibility for the slow rollout of vax and general response to Delta threat, no pre-planning, and now people doing it for her. At least Willie Jackson can acknowledge they're slow off the mark, says Sandy. And this one from another listener who says, Willie Jackson, the guy missed his calling. He could make a serious income compiling a dictionary of cliches. Thanks for your feedback. Keep it coming. Text us on 2101 or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. It is 17 minutes to 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. He muriaki ina pita pita kōrero. After the news at 6, we talk to Prof Shaun Hendy about the latest COVID modelling and how different vaccination rates change the way our future looks. Could Queenstown Lakes be the experiment with inclusionary zoning that New Zealand needs? The District Council is seeking feedback on plans that could see developers having to hand over homes or cash for the right to construct residential developments in the area. Timothy Brown reports.
The Queenstown Lakes District Council may boldly go when no other New Zealand council has gone before. Its most radical option is effectively a pay-to-play system for developers. And the cost? Providing a proportion of affordable housing in their developments in an area where the median home now sells for more than $1 million, 23% higher than the national average, despite the average income being 16% lower. Queenstown Lakes Community Housing Trust Executive Officer Julie Scott says those figures show why inclusionary zoning is a must. She says the Trust wants to house 1,000 households by 2028, but without inclusionary zoning, it'll struggle.
This goal that we've set of 1,000 homes by 2028, we can look at the current pipeline of what we've got coming to us from developers over the next few years, and it's around 300 sections, so that's another 300 households we can help, but that is nowhere close to our 1,000 goal.
She says the inclusionary zoning provisions the council has proposed are similar to what was in effect in the district under the previous government's special housing areas. That's shown developers can carve out a profit while still contributing to the wider good of the community.
They learn to factor it into their overall development cost when they're purchasing the land or when they're developing the land. So there's a whole heap of economic evidence to show that it's still quite possible to make a good profit as a developer, even through the inclusionary zoning process.
The Queenstown Lakes Community Housing Trust's waiting list has now grown to about 750 households. That's households who are currently eligible for assistance, but for whom there is currently no home. It excludes people in the district on immigrant visas, and the Salvation Army's Queenstown Community Ministries Director, Lieutenant Andrew Wilson, says it demonstrates just how deep the crisis runs.
What's still a significant area of need is those at the lower end of the spectrum to access any form of housing. We still get requests almost weekly from members of our community in one way or another looking for emergency accommodation.
Mr Wilson says housing options are severely lacking. The inclusionary zoning plans go hand in hand with the council's home strategy that attempts to deal with the affordability crisis that has seen Queenstown Lakes house prices quintuple over the past 2 decades and now has 1 in 5 residents unable to meet their bills or left with no disposable income. Otago Regional Councillor Alexa Forbes, who sat on the Queenstown Lakes District Council until 2019, says the District Council is doing all it can to address housing affordability. But the current plans are just a band-aid, as shown by the type of households currently on the Community Housing Trust's waiting list.
Those people, they're not the social housing. They're people who are on normal wages doing normal jobs that cannot possibly get into the market on their own. And when I'm talking about that, I'm talking nurses, police, teachers, those sorts of professional, essential jobs, and yet people aren't paid enough to be able to actually get into the market here.
The home strategy aims to increase affordable housing and housing options while ensuring homes are healthy, warm and sustainable. Alexa Forbes says central government involvement is needed to tackle the crisis.
Kāinga Ora pulled out of here some years back and really left very, very few houses and very few options for any social housing. So there's really very, very little social housing.
At present, Kāinga Ora has just 9 homes in Queenstown and 4 in Wanaka. Consultation on both Queenstown Lakes home strategy and the inclusionary zoning policy closes on Sunday.
US President Joe Biden has taken steps to diffuse the tension with France after the surprise submarine deal with Australia. In what was called a friendly phone call with French President Emmanuel Macron, Mr Biden admitted there could have been more communication about the deal. As the two presidents spoke, Australia's Scott Morrison did the rounds in Washington, locking down finer details of the revamped alliance that's caused global consternation. The ABC's Greg Jennett reports.
Before the ceremonial guard at the Pentagon and at the Capitol.
As House Speaker, it is my official honour and personal privilege to welcome Prime Minister Scott Morrison of Australia.
Scott Morrison took the Washington whistle-stop tour. Nancy Pelosi gushed.
Pretty exciting.
Even on attributes rarely noted in introductions here.
Of course, climate change, and thank you for your leadership in that regard.
The Speaker led the Prime Minister into a bipartisan meeting with the most senior House Republicans because this was no courtesy visit.
There are a few places around the world that echo democracy and freedom, like Capitol Hill.
When the time comes for Australia to go nuclear, it'll only happen with Congress's approval.
And so I'm keen to be able to provide those assurances today as we work together to implement this very fine partnership between the greatest of friends.
The first nuclear-fuelled sub an Australian sailor steps foot on will almost certainly be beyond the tenure of any current leader in this project, Scott Morrison, Boris Johnson or Joe Biden. That's why, when they're not talking among themselves, the AUKUS triumvirate is doing what it can to explain its deal to others.
He acknowledged that there could have been greater consultation.
White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki's told of the 30-minute phone call her president finally secured to Emmanuel Macron.
And the call, again, as I stated earlier, was a friendly call, and there was agreement that we wanted to move forward in our relationship.
France's ambassador, recalled last week in diplomatic protest, will come back to Washington next week.
To build a safer future.
At the White House, Joe Biden's attention soon turned to pandemic safety rather than international security.
Today, I'm announcing another historic commitment. The United States is buying another 500 million doses of Pfizer to donate to low and middle-income countries around the world.
Scott Morrison also pitched in at the video Pandemic Vaccination Summit.
I'm pleased today to announce that Australia will share a further 20 million doses and procure up to another 20 million beyond that.
In all, Australia's up to 60 million doses pledged. In its ambitious play for an Indo-Pacific power step-up, vaccine diplomacy shots are the easy sell.
In human couples, getting cold feet often isn't the best sign, but not for this couple of Gentoo penguins, Buster and 99, who are celebrating their 24th anniversary at Kelly Tarleton's. Contrary to popular belief, penguins don't always mate for life, but that isn't the case for these two lovebirds, who together have reared 19 babies. Penguin keeper Kristen Buckley joins me now. Kia ora, Kristen.
Hey, how's it going?
Very well. Tell us a bit about penguin love. What's the attraction between Buster and 99?
Well, they've been together pretty much since they got here. So they arrived together from Scotland in 1995. So they paired up in 1997, and they've pretty much been together since then. So every year, kind of building the nest in the same kind of spot, bringing pebbles to each other. And, yeah, over those 24 years, just getting closer and closer, I guess.
Is that unusual for penguins to keep, hooking up each season?
They're actually surprisingly similar to people. So in kind of the same way that some human couples do tend to stay together for a long time. Similar with penguins, like if it's working out really well, they'll tend to stay together for a long time. But if it's not going so well, they do tend to just kind of break up.
So neither of them have a wandering eye. They haven't, or you haven't observed them contemplating moving on to another partner?
Well, obviously nobody's perfect, so there has been a few little slip-ups, but at the end of the day, they always come back for each other, which is good.
So 24 years, I wonder how that compares to the average human marriage, do you know?
Apparently, in New Zealand, a lot of marriages tend to last about 14 years, so these guys are already doing about 10 years better than us, which is pretty impressive.
Yeah, but in all seriousness, do you know what the attraction is between them? They have raised a pretty big whānau, so everybody is obviously pulling their weight in the relationship.
Yeah, Buster, he's really, really good at finding nesting materials, so he's constantly on the lookout. Sometimes he'll come and steal our brushes while we're trying to scrub because he's that, interested in anything he can possibly use for his nest. He'll steal, anything he can think of. So I think his creativity and constant, drive to build the nest is what makes him so attractive to her. And she's just really reliable and dependent, and she's really, really good at collecting pebbles as well. So they're a good little team.
And does Buster share responsibilities for raising the chicks?
Yeah, he does. He's a really, really good dad. Penguins are pretty equal, so they both pretty much spend about the same amount of time looking after the eggs and the chicks. So, he's really, really hardworking.
I think you've hit on something there, Kristen. It's like shared domestic chores and shared raising of the offspring.
Exactly.
So what are the expectations for this season then in terms of babies?
Well, they are getting quite old, so we're not expecting them to be raising any babies this year. They're probably going to be laying some infertile eggs. But they're really good parents. So if we did need a couple to look after an orphan chick or something like that, it's always good to have them there.
So they could become fosters.
Yeah.
So how long do penguins live for?
30 is a really, really good age. So they're both getting pretty old now. They're both 26 years old.
Oh no, so they might only have 4 more years together.
Yeah, sadly, yeah.
So, hey, in Auckland, obviously, we're in a situation we're not really free to move around at the moment, but when we are Buster and 99 visible? Can you see them?
Yep, they're very visible. They're about in the middle of the enclosure. If you do want to see them, you can always ask any member of staff and we can point them out to you. But there's lots of other nests as well, so there's plenty of action going on to look at.
And just one thing, 99, where did the name come from?
I think it's a reference to that old TV show, Get Smart.
Yeah, Maxwell Smart. So 99. She is named after 99 from Maxwell Smart. Okay.
She is. That's her number, her ID number. So I think that's, kind of worked into it somehow.
Can you what is it like at Kelly Tarleton's during lockdown?
It's surprisingly normal. A few of the penguins are missing playing with people through the glass, but other than that, it's pretty much business as usual, really. Still doing shark feeds, still doing all the usual stuff. There's just no one to see it.
And do you think your animal guests miss us?
I think so, yeah. There's definitely a few of the penguins who, they really hang out for seeing people through the glass. But they're pretty happy anyway, but they'll definitely be happy when they've got guests coming back.
Lovely to talk to you, Kristen. Thanks for joining us. That is the penguin keeper, Kristen Buckley, who is from Kelly Tarleton's, talking there about Buster and 99 celebrating their 24th anniversary together. And contrary to popular belief, penguins don't always mate for life, but these two are a true love story, apparently. Women have been playing cricket since the mid-1700s, and for all that time, the players hitting the ball have been referred to as batsmen. Now, the esteemed Marylebone Cricket Club in London has decided to change the word to the gender-neutral batter, not to be confused with the foodstuff you put around your fish. The BBC's Jo Wilson explains.
Cricket can at times appear to be both inhibited and inspired by tradition. The MCC's status as guardian of the laws is, after all, largely historical. But the club is determined to reflect the times. Women's cricket is no longer an afterthought. It's a professional game, able to command its own crowds and coverage. The MCC says the change to batters from batsmen recognises the changing landscape of the game in modern times. And as the club points out, many commentators have been happily using batters to describe whoever is wielding the willow for many years. Furthermore, when did we ever use the phrase bowl man in reference to the individual with the ball? Cricket, however, remains a sport beset by terminology, often unclear in origin and description. We refer to fielders in gender-neutral terms. But if you move from long on to short leg, miss the point somewhere near gully, you could find yourself still in the vicinity of third man, who might, quite conceivably, be a woman.
And for your feedback now, this is on MIQ and the borders, lots of this coming in. And this is about our earlier interview where it was suggested that business need basically a parallel MIQ system because they can't get overseas to do deals and trade. This listener says, please do not forget us ordinary people who need to travel home to see our families abroad. My parents are ageing and I have 2 new nieces I've never met because MIQ is an impossibility. It is heartbreaking. Someone else says... We should support this idea for business, but have a year's prison for any offenders and a minimum of $1 million fine for a business, and maybe that would be acceptable. Less than that, no dice. The last people we can trust are entitled, super important business people, that listener says. Rosa Nelson says, I have to disagree. Business and sports people shouldn't have different privileges than the ordinary New Zealander trying to get home to see sick relatives. The reality is we don't have the capacity. Everyone is suffering, not just business. Another listener agrees. Why is all the focus on businesses, they say? Some ordinary New Zealanders are required to travel overseas. They should be considered too. Another person, though, reckons Ian McRae, who was from Orion Health, is 100% correct. Another says elimination is a futile strategy. The problem with people isolating home is very few people live by themselves, this listener says, which means if they were due at a later time, then all of their home contacts would have to, if they tested positive at a later time, all of their home contacts would have to isolate for 14 days as well and not be able to go to the supermarket for supplies even. Anna says, my sister in the UK has to do a spit test before going into work. It's just standard for her. I can't see why we are so slow to adopt modern practices.
Ahi Māori e RNZ News at 6, ko Sarah Thompson tōko ingoa. A COVID-19 modeller says even with very high rates of vaccination, longer-term public health measures will still be needed to fight COVID-19. With an 80% vaccination rate, new modelling suggests lockdowns may still be needed. It predicts 7,000 deaths and 60,000 hospitalisations per year. Professor Shaun Hendy says a range of moderate and sustainable public health measures will be necessary for extra protection.
Masks, better ventilation, rapid tests, vaccine certificates, for example, rather than our current approach that's very much based around lockdowns.
Shaun Hendy says achieving population immunity with the infectious Delta variant present is unlikely to happen through vaccination alone. The Māori Development Minister wants Māori in Auckland to step up and get vaccinated against COVID-19. Just over 50% of Māori have received their first vaccination, compared with 78% of the general population. In some areas, such as Counties Manukau, the gap is wider. Willie Jackson told Checkpoint he doesn't know whether Māori can achieve a rate of 90% by October 4th, when alert levels are next reviewed.
We will strive to get it as high as we can. We're working on the ground with our providers, Turiki Healthcare, Waipareta Trust. So I can't guarantee that. I can only guarantee a huge effort that is being rolled out.
Willie Jackson says he's encouraged that Māori leaders are supporting the vaccination effort. Iwi leaders in Rotorua are relieved another MIQ facility will not be opened in the city. Tū Hoirangi Ngāti Wāhiao, Te Paitapu o Te Pākira Marae, Ngāti Wakawe and Te Arawa leaders were vehemently against a fourth facility. They say they are a community particularly vulnerable to COVID-19 and the threat of community transmission from a facility is an ever-present danger. Rotorua already has 3 MIQ, significantly more isolation facilities per head of population than any other New Zealand centre. Hawke's Bay Hospital says the pressure on the emergency department has been unrelenting as staff issue an ultimatum. The Nurses Union has given the hospital a provisional improvement notice to address health and safety concerns by October 5th. It says staff are working under incredible pressure, which is severely impacting their physical and mental health. The District Health Board says the emergency department has faced increased demand with cases of the respiratory disease, RSV, COVID lockdown challenges and wards at near capacity. But it says recently there's been a big investment in senior clinical staff. The police believe a woman whose body was found after she failed to return from a morning walk in Auckland has been the victim of foul play. 27-year-old Lena Zhang, who has Down syndrome, was last seen about 6 o'clock Wednesday morning in Mount Albert when she left home. A body was found last night in bush off a walkway in Wairaraka Domain. Detective Inspector Aaron Pascoe says the nature of how Ms Zhang was found and a post-mortem triggered the homicide investigation.
It is clear from the scene, from how she was found and from the post-mortem that she is the victim of foul play.
Aaron Pascoe says a man was spotted on the walkway around the same time and may be able to help. He says the man was dark-skinned and balding and wearing a mask. The police are also appealing for anyone who lives near Wairaraka Domain who has CCTV to contact them. The Colombian government says a town near the border with Panama has been overwhelmed with thousands of migrants trying to reach the United States. The authorities in the Colombian coastal town of Necoclí say 19,000 mainly Haitian travellers are stranded. The BBC's Leonardo Rocha reports.
A senior Colombian official, Carlos Camargo, has said that an agreement with Panama restricts to 250 per day the number of people allowed to cross the Gulf of Urabá near the border between the two countries. From there, migrants proceed on foot to Panama as part of a long journey north towards the United States. Mr. Camargo has said that many migrants are risking their lives by trying to illegally cross the Gulf on substandard boats.
And angry scenes broke out at Haiti's main airport after migrants were deported there from a border town in Texas. There are reports some of the migrants were told they would be returning to Haiti and then tried to reboard the plane. It's 4 minutes past 6. Moving now into sports news, the All Blacks coach says his side will have to embrace the size of the occasion when they play the Springboks in Townsville on Saturday night. The test will be the 100th between the two nations after 100 years of playing each other. Ian Foster has made several changes to the team from last week's win over Argentina, picking his strongest possible side. The All Blacks travel from Brisbane to Townsville today, and he says the nerves will grow the closer they get to the test.
The guys are just really working hard to produce some performances that I guess that we can be proud of, and I think we're really focusing on that at the moment. But I think as we get to Townsville and we get a feel of it, I think things will start to hit home about the enormity of the game.
The All Blacks top the Rugby Championship standings ahead of South Africa. The mixed martial arts star Israel Adesanya says he will never fight in New Zealand again. Speaking on his official YouTube channel, Adesanya says the treatment of his teammate Dan Hooker during lockdown and the frustrations with the MIQ system means his dreams of defending his UFC world title on home soil are dead. Hooker's preparations for his fight in Las Vegas on Sunday have been heavily affected after police twice shut down training camps during Level 4 lockdown. Israel Adesanya, who hasn't fought at home since joining the UFC in early 2018, has previously spoken about his desire to defend his title at Eden Park or in Dunedin. And that's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Eric Brenstrom on the world's weather. Just a few hours after the spring equinox, Louisa Tola on a new exhibition in Christchurch on traditional Fijian female tattooing, a practice known as Vengia. Our overseas correspondent Rima Bast is on the line from Sudan, and our changing world asks what impact our COVID masks are having on our ability to read each other's emotions. On Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Te reo irirangi o Aotearoa, on air, online and on demand. Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Mire Friday. Northland to Taranaki, also Coromandel, Bay of Plenty and Taupo. Showers, some heavy and possibly thundery about Coromandel and Bay of Plenty tonight. Clearing tomorrow and fine spells increasing. Gisborne to Wairarapa, also Whanganui and Taihape to Wellington. Cloudy with periods of rain, clearing this evening and mainly fine tomorrow. Marlborough and Nelson will see scattered showers, some possibly heavy, clearing tonight and fine tomorrow. Bulla and Westland will have showers in Bulla, mainly fine in Westland tonight, with a few spots of rain in the north, but cloudy periods and showers tomorrow. Canterbury will be fine, apart from patchy rain in the north tonight. Otago and Southland will be fine tonight, with scattered showers tomorrow. Fiordland will see showers, turning to rain tomorrow evening, with some heavy and possibly thundery falls. And for the Chatham Islands, cloudy with rain developing tonight, then clearing tomorrow afternoon and becoming fine. That concludes the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Midi Friday. It's 7 minutes past 6.
Kia ora rā e ho, no mai, hoke mai. This is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. New modelling shows New Zealand needs to vaccinate most people 5 years and up to keep the COVID death rate about the same as the seasonal flu. And Te Pūnaha Matatini modellers say the higher the level of vaccination across the country, the lower the need for lockdowns. Roughly 73% of the country's eligible population has currently received one dose of the Pfizer vaccine. Well, joining me now is Professor Shaun Hendy. Kia ora, Shaun.
Kia ora, Lisa.
Can we just talk through, look at your modelling for 75% vaccination rate for over 12-year-olds. What does that translate to in terms of hospitalisations, deaths, all the bad stuff?
Yeah, so if you look at that, and that's kind of the number where if we kind of stopped in the vaccination program now and got everybody that second dose, that's where we'd be at. You're still talking well over 1.5 million people unvaccinated, and of course we haven't had outbreaks here, so that no natural immunity. So you're looking at quite significant health outcomes. And this does depend on the vaccine efficacy, our outcomes, and there's still things that we don't know completely about that. But a large fraction of those people could become infected. So we could be looking at 1 million plus infections. There'd be some people who got breakthrough infections, even though that they were vaccinated. A large number of those people would need hospitalisation. So 90,000 maybe, and then we'd have significant number of fatalities from that.
And number of deaths, what's your modelling on that 75% 12 plus vaccination rate?
Yeah. So that's about 12,000. Based on our central assumptions about the vaccine efficacy.
That seems like a colossal number of people, right? Because if we look at America, it has a death rate about 1 in 500 citizens, right? And the numbers that you present with that 75% vaccination rate are slightly higher than that. And the United States is, well, arguably had one of the worst responses to COVID in the Western world. So would we really be comparable with the United States if we sat at a 75% vaccination rate, which I think is probably higher than what they've got?
Yeah, no. So no. I mean, what we would imagine would happen in that situation is we'd have to go back to using lockdowns. This is really the outcome if we were to just open up, rely on very basic public health restrictions such as using masks, etc., and not use the most stringent public health restrictions, which I don't think would happen here in New Zealand, and certainly hasn't happened in places like the US.
So with this modelling, Shaun, are you assuming that the border is completely open?
No. So we've looked at a medium open border. So we're not getting numbers of people that were coming through in 2019. We're getting something like the travel bubble volume that we had when we were open with Australia, and we've got roughly a case coming in per day. Which would be consistent with the overseas prevalence at the moment if we had those kind of volumes.
So I suppose the question is here, because those numbers seem very big, is this an entirely unlikely scenario? I mean, is this model way off in terms of the numbers?
Yeah, look, what we're trying to do is give the government visibility over its policy choices. So when this is not meant to be a forecast, we don't think that these measures would actually be used. Instead, we'd be forced to go back to using lockdowns. This was kind of the point of the modelling, was to show how those trade-offs play out with vaccination rates, and at what point can you get away from using lockdowns.
So would you describe this as a worst-case scenario but a highly unlikely scenario?
Yeah, it'd be very unlikely. I don't think any Western government would really let that happen. And, it's very hard to see Western governments that have just let the disease rip. Even countries like Sweden have had quite stringent restrictions in place throughout the pandemic.
So is it just scaremongering then to put it out?
Well, it does tell us about the counterfactual, and there are people, and you just have to look to Australia and some of the reopening plans that we see being put out there by governments around the world. So I think it is fair enough to look at these scenarios. We're not telling people this is going to happen, but we are looking at the consequences of options that are being discussed at the moment. So
do you believe that is a scenario we would ever see in New Zealand?
I very much doubt it. Both major parties are supportive of the elimination strategy. I don't think we would follow that path.
So what level of vaccination would we need to have to avoid future lockdowns?
Yeah, so it's once you get up into that 90% level, particularly if we start vaccinating the over 5s as well as the current over 12 rollout, that starts to get to the point where we could actually get by with these, relatively light touch public health restrictions, use of masks, setting ventilation standards for indoor venues and workplaces, widespread availability of rapid tests. Those things at that vaccination level would be able to keep outbreaks under control.
And what does the border look like in that scenario?
The border you can play with a lot of different options at the border. We in the paper itself, we're looking at a sort of a medium volume of travellers. Probably wouldn't be looking at MIQ apart from people from very high-risk countries. So a lot of travellers from countries would be able to come in, possibly have home isolation, and then maybe use a rapid test every day to just check on their COVID status.
And when you say medium volume of travellers, could you put a number on it? How many people would you see coming across the border?
So I think it's roughly about 50,000 a week. 50,000. Does that sound? I haven't got that at my fingertips. But
we're talking thousands. We're talking thousands.
Yeah. So it's similar to the volumes that we've had when we had the travel bubble open with Australia.
So for looking to the future, how long do we need MIQ for?
Look, we may need MIQ for quite some time, but it might not. It may be that the most travellers don't have to go through MIQ, and that we use MIQ for people coming back from high-risk countries that still have large ongoing outbreaks.
So we might need it for quite a long time. What do you consider to be quite a long time?
It's very hard to see the end state, the end game for COVID. There's still a lot of water to go under the bridge. We still got a lot to learn about how effective the vaccines are in the long term, whether we'll need booster shots, and whether new variants will emerge that may be even more challenging than Delta. I would say, we're looking at having to keep MIQ facilities, even if most people don't have to go through them, for at least 5 years in play.
Can we get to level 1 in New Zealand by Christmas? And what would that take in terms of vaccination rates?
Yeah, look, it depends very much on eliminating this current outbreak. I think if we don't eliminate this current outbreak, then we're probably going to have to stay in something like level 2 for before Christmas. So let's just keep our fingers crossed that we do eliminate this outbreak. I think it is a bit of a on the knife edge at the moment. We're seeing those numbers just sort of bubble along at between 10 and 20 a day, something like that. If we can quickly eliminate that, then I think we can swiftly move back to level 1. If we're still seeing this sort of this long tail, then it would be very dangerous to move back to level 1.
Really appreciate your time this evening. That is Professor Shaun Hendy. Thanks for joining us. Police have launched a homicide investigation following the death of a woman near a walkway in the Auckland suburb of Mount Albert. Lena Zhang, who is 130 centimetres tall, was reported missing after going for a walk early yesterday morning. Her body was found in an area of bush off a walkway yesterday afternoon. Kate Gregan reports.
At a media briefing late this afternoon, Detective Inspector Aaron Pascoe said Lena Zhang, who had Down syndrome, was wearing a long-sleeve purple top and dark pants. He said the 28-year-old walked slowly from Jersey Avenue along Richardson Road and then up Grant Avenue towards the Mount Albert domain.
We want to hear from anybody who saw her walking this route between 6:30 and 7:30 a.m. yesterday. We've made a number of inquiries and we've identified a person of interest from CCTV images who was walking up Grand Ave towards the walkway to Summit Drive at about 7:30 a.m. It's important that we identify and locate this male as we believe he can assist our investigation. We also want to hear from any local residents who live along the streets we've mentioned. That's Jersey Ave, Richardson Road, Grand Ave and Summit Drive. We're particularly interested in anybody who may have CCTV cameras that cover either the roadway or the footpaths.
Detective Inspector Pascoe released a photo of the man of interest, describing him as a dark-skinned male wearing a blue hoodie with a distinctive mark on his forehead.
He is balding on top of his head and appears to have quite a receding hairline. At the time, he was wearing a mask.
He said Lena regularly walked this route, and when she did not return home, her family went searching for her, taking her exact route but not seeing her body. She was later discovered by a member of the public in bush off a 50-metre lane between Grand Avenue and Summit Drive. He said it was clear from a post-mortem and how Lena was found that she was a victim of foul play.
And it did occur during daylight hours. She was located at 4:30 in the afternoon and left home sometime after 6:30. So that's one of the reasons we've got additional reassurance patrols in the area, and that'll be quite visible to the local community, as well as having our staff knocking on doors and doing the scene examination. But it is concerning, there's no doubt about that, which is why we're determined to catch this offender.
Police say Lena's family is devastated. They're urging anyone with information to call Operation Eliza on 0800 352 399 or Crime Stoppers on 0800 555 111.
It is 19 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoints on RNZ National. 2 days into Auckland's newfound alert level freedoms, it hasn't been smooth sailing for the reopened hospitality businesses. Staff are wrangling customers to follow the strict rules and even copping abuse while working with a skeleton crew. Here's Kim Moody.
After 5 weeks of lockdown, Aucklanders have been treating themselves to takeaway coffee, dinner and treats. It's been a tough time, and Unite Union's National Secretary, John Crocker, says takeaway staff, like essential supermarket and healthcare workers, are bearing the brunt of it.
It's about customers losing it. They're impatient. They're acting like they're almost addicted to some of these products. And when you have someone who's been waiting a long time and they have some bizarre need for this product, they're acting quite inappropriately and irrationally, and it's getting dangerous in some places.
He says the unions referred instances of abuse to the police. Some fast food joints have been inundated after reopening, and the sheer number of customers, coupled with the extra precautions staff have to take to keep safe, is pushing up wait times. And after 5 weeks of waiting, a little longer is proving too much for some.
Some of these staff are used to getting drunks on Friday and Saturday night, but we're seeing that more widespread around the clock. And, in a sense, they're safer because, we've only got drive-through open. So, in a way, they're safer because they're inside the building, so they don't have to confront the customers as closely most of the time. But then you're getting heightened aggression. So there's kind of, an element of being more safe, but an element of being more exposed at the same time.
The reopening came with a raft of rules for businesses to enforce: contactless pickup, delivery or drive-through only, physical distancing, mandated mask use and contact tracing. Restaurant Association Chief Executive Marissa Boudoir says Auckland businesses that rely on face-to-face patronage have been completely locked out of trading for 66 of the 544 days since last year's lockdown.
Even though many of our businesses are welcoming their customers
back into the business contactlessly, and that's great to see. However, the smiles that are across the industry's faces are hiding a lot of anxiety and stress that these business owners have been facing and are still facing currently as a result of the pandemic.
The associations released a roadmap to help the industry after the COVID-19 crisis after meeting with the government. Its 8 suggestions include an extension to the wage subsidy and removing GST for dining customers. On the streets of Auckland's Panmure, cafe owners say the local support's getting them through.
Yesterday was busy actually because all the neighbours, they're supporting us. Yeah. And just helping us to back to normal,
Yesterday was manic. We have some really loyal customers and they were all here yesterday wanting coffee and some food. We've had to really try and diversify this time to kind of go outside the boundaries of what we would normally do, providing meal kits for at home and cooked meals.
Bridget McDonald, Executive Director of the NZ Alcohol Beverages Council, says right now supporting your local means more than ever.
Having some cash in the till means that they can keep their staff on board, and we really do need to make sure that people are keeping jobs. Businesses have quite high overhead, so, money in the till means they can pay their bills.
John Crocker says be prepared for service to be a bit slower.
Realise that the staff are there to give you what you want, and they're doing their best, and that there will be a delay. There will be a delay because there are other customers who are thinking exactly the same thing as you, and there'll be a delay because the staff have to keep everyone safer. And that's part of the cost. We're not at level 1. This is level 3. Yes, you can kind of have what you want, but there are serious restrictions. And you have to understand that and be patient in understanding.
So next time you're picking up your flat white or fries, spare a thought for the person making it for you.
The government has announced who will lead the Maori Health Authority, which it hopes will address the staggering inequities Māori face in the health system. The country's 20 district health boards are set to be scrapped as part of the major reforms and will be replaced by one new body, Health New Zealand. The Maori Health Authority will work alongside Health New Zealand with a joint role, commissioning for primary, community and kaupapa Māori services. Our reporter Matai O'Connor met some of those who will be involved.
I actually go back to my great-grandmother. My great-grandmother was a foundation member of the Māori Women's Welfare League, and I did not know her. She passed away before I was born, but she left a whole lot of writings about her dreams for the health and well-being of her own whānau, hapu, iwi and our people. And it's continuing to uphold the dreams and aspirations of those who have already gone before us.
That is Awarangi Tamahiri, summing up what all members want to see the Māori Health Authority to fulfil. She has extensive experience working across a range of entities and recently has been on the front line with Te Whānau Waipareira to help increase Māori vaccination rates in Tāmaki Makaurau. A health leader who is not known to hold back from towing a hard line against the government, Lady Tereti Moxon, will also join the new body. She explains her dream for what they will achieve.
It's good. It's good to feel like for the first time forever that we are now starting to get a bit of traction on the Māori making decisions for ourselves and taking our own mana into our own hands to be able to do for ourselves what we believe needs to be done.
Co-chair Sharon Shea is the chair of the Bay of Plenty District Health Board and also a member of the Health NZ body. She hopes the reforms will create equity for everyone.
It is about enabling whānau to be the agents of their own change and creating lots more opportunities for us to support that and build whānau capability so our children, our mokopuna, can fulfil the rangatiratanga that they were born with.
Ms. Shea is clear in that the accountability to bridge the gap sits on the shoulders of the whole health system, not on Māori themselves. The Maori Health Authority will work alongside Health New Zealand with a joint role commissioning for primary, community and kaupapa Māori services. Tipa Mahuta will sit aside Sharon Shea as co-chair. Her pai tawhiti, or long-term goal, is quite clear.
Well, for me, it's as simple as whānau Māori can champion their health future, but at the moment they're so far away from directing their health outcomes.
Leaders from across Māori health, governance and academia make up the rest of the lineup. They include Chris Tooley, Dr Sue Kringle, Dr Mataroria Linden and Fiona Pym. The mahi is already underway, but the authority will be officially in place from July next year.
Auckland Council is telling the government it is not keen on its Three Waters reforms. The proposed changes would see control of drinking, waste and stormwater systems be taken from the hands of 67 councils into 4 massive regional authorities. Today at a Zoom council meeting, an overwhelming majority of elected members showed they're concerned the reforms will result in a lack of democratic accountability and control over council assets. Here's our reporter Jean Bell.
Today, Auckland Mayor Phil Goff made one thing clear. He supports the objectives of the reform, but the government's plans won't get his approval as long as locals don't have a big say in how water surfaces are managed.
And what I am absolutely passionate about is that I can never support something that creates an entity that will not be accountable through elected representatives to the community that it serves.
Finance Committee Chairperson Desley Simpson also aired her concerns.
I'm certainly not prepared to support handing over in excess of $10 billion of our assets on behalf of the people of Auckland to get considerably less than 50% of governance. I'm worried about the fact that this might be mandated.
She's frustrated with the model and thinks it hasn't been formulated with Auckland in mind.
It doesn't seem to have taken into consideration that a third of the country, thanks to central government legislation, is actually governed differently.
Desley Simpson thinks a council-controlled organisation, Watercare, is already running at the scale being sought for the rest of the country. A number of councillors spoke of racist feedback from ratepayers about what the reforms will mean for Māori control over water. But Deputy Mayor Bill Cashmore is shocked by the hundreds of emails he's received from people who aren't up to speed on the reforms in general.
There is a big information work here in front of the government yet to get this right, because the public do not understand.
Councillor Wayne Walker is calling for information on the reforms to be more clearly available on the council's website. The government is yet to put forward its final proposal, but Mayor Phil Goff has vowed ratepayers will get their say when it does.
The council will consult with Aucklanders on this proposal to inform the council's response, and I regard that as critical.
Local Government Minister Nanai Mahuta has previously said the reforms are about acting for the greater good, with the aim to have ratepayers dish out less on water bills and councils benefiting from long-term infrastructure investment. Auckland Council, along with all other local government bodies, have until October 1st to give their feedback on the changes. From then, the government will consider its next steps.
And just before we go, a reminder from the police who are, policing the checkpoints at the borders of Auckland. They say there's a significantly higher number of vehicles trying to travel through the northern and southern checkpoints following the move to level 3, and a bunch of them have had to be turned around, including people attempting to relocate to new homes or travel for shared childcare arrangements because they don't have an exemption. Apparently you can't relocate your own home at this level, and your place of departure cannot be in the alert level 3 area. So they're telling people, don't forget, check online to make sure you're following the rules. Ko te kaupapa tuatahi a pōpō tomorrow from 5 a.m. First up speaks to a Kiwi, one of dozens forced to charter flights to Australia to start a new life. Kaua e wariwari te atatero I a mātou kōrero. Check out our videos and stories online. We're back tomorrow.
Kia ora tātou. RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Ko Sarah Thompson tōko ingoa. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says level 4 lockdowns will be a thing of the past if there is a high rate of vaccination. Meanwhile, the latest modelling suggests that other public health measures will still be needed to keep the virus at bay. Police have been contacted in Auckland as some fast food workers face abuse from angry customers, and detectives want to talk to a man captured on CCTV close to where the body of missing Auckland woman Lena Zhang was found. Those are your headlines. Our next news update is at 7.
The last night of the BBC Proms is a musical celebration like no other. And this year's last night is an emotional 3-hour extravaganza featuring the BBC Symphony Chorus and Orchestra with special guests. They'll celebrate the new and uphold the old traditions, including the last night smash hit sequence. The last night of the BBC Proms, Friday evening from 8 on RNZ Concert.
Thanks, Clarissa. And I'm Brian Crump, getting ready for another night on RNZ National. Not the last night, just another night, which commences officially after the news at 7. One of my guests in the next hour is our severe weather forecaster. Actually, he's retired from that job. He's still a meteorologist, but he's retired from Met Service, Eric Brenstrom, with the world's weather. And it's kind of appropriate we've got him on today because today is the equinox. Yes, the sun set at the North Pole at around about 7:30 this morning, our time, the same time it was rising at the South Pole. And the day is as long as the night everywhere else.